Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Supporting a Feeling Life. My name is Jonathan.
I'm Yasmin.
And today we want to do kind of a part two on this whole understanding of what goes on in your head. Today we're going to be talking about balancing the head and the mind and the heart. We had a number of you respond to the episode we did on why it hurts to live in your head and how it made a lot of sense, which is gratifying to hear.
It is.
That for many, knowing there's an alternative to actually being in that constant repetitive sort of story of your mind is quite a revelation. So welcome to another episode, and we hope that this one also helps support you in understanding the more natural language of life.
What we want to cover today is about what the mind does when it doesn't have the answers that it needs, what it searches for, what it projects forward into the fear, the assumptions, the judgments, and the projections, and the distress that can cause, because projecting means that depending on how you're feeling and how aware you are of how you're feeling, you're going to be projecting into a situation or into the next hours, days, etc. And it is important to always remember that if your mind takes off with that, it's going to cause you distress, and it's going to project the distress you are already feeling.
Getting to know what actually is the common familiar story in your mind is really, really important. Our mind is a really valuable part of who we are. We've touched on this before. It's a tool. It's a powerful tool, but for most of us, we are kind of in a sort of master-slave relationship with our mind, which is completely the wrong way around, where we feel mastered by this insistence that our mind be preoccupied with things that we must be focused on and must be doing and must be thinking about. And we love it. You know, the mind loves having that opportunity to push ahead and project ahead. And so getting to know that sort of familiar story, and if you kind of reflect back over your journey, you'll see there'll be a thread of familiar, often angst or worry. It'll be relationships, finance, work, your future, who you're meant to be, what really matters in your life. There'll be this kind of like familiar themes that well, I think we both sort of see with people who come to us that carry. So first of all, getting to know what it is that you tend to favour with that sort of mental projection is really important.
It's also important to recognise that some stories do need listening to. If there are things repeating in your life, then you will have a story about that repetition, and it will stimulate a feeling, and so it will feel as though, oh, here it comes again. And it isn't an invalid moment of awareness, it's something to pay attention to, because it will mean that somehow you are needing to communicate further to change a pattern or to change a situation that does continue to repeat. And I think that often we like to believe that others will consider what we need or will know without our saying, or understand even if we have said. And I think this is something people often come up against, is that everyone's living in their own consciousness and in their own mind and in their own heart. And there's often a lot going on. And so we're not always open to or aware of or including or considering of others' situations. So if for you've got something repeating, you will have a story about it repeating.
So that's the part that needs to be listened to, particularly if it is an ongoing thing for you. I think what you said then, honey, about the fact that we do have this assumption that people will see what's happening for us. There's often a long thread of feeling that has connected to us, either to the possibility that we'll be seen and our needs will be met, or to the experience that tells us that this is not going to happen. And a lot of that begins, would you agree, when we're very young?
I think it does, definitely. It's also a part of the sensitives in life, and I know that those who are sensitive, who are the meek, I guess, that have been talked about, who aren't strongly assertive or just kind of very focused on themselves don't find it so easy to absolutely claim a space or claim what's happening. They don't do that so easily, or they do it, but not in a big loud way that others who are more in the mind do. So I think that if you're more sensitive, you're going to find that this balance between the mind and the heart can be a little bit fraught.
And yet, as you learn to make this transition towards a more recognition of what feels right, and give yourself permission to actually trust that this is right for you, then you can kind of rebuild an expression, a speaking up from that place. Because I know you taught me a long time ago that if you're feeling something, or if I'm feeling something, it's really important for that to be listened to, so that actually it's taken care of. But most of us grow up very quickly diminishing the feeling and telling ourselves it's wrong to feel that way because it doesn't fit the louder or more dominating energies that we're around, those more head-based energies, either in ourselves or in other people.
Absolutely. So often our mind can become quite loud and very convincing of the things that are dominating or asking for our attention. So if you've ever projected worry and fear or nervousness and become anxious because of that, you'll very quickly realize that it's generated a whole other set of feelings that you've had to attend to. When actually just slowing down, connecting to yourself is a way to find that moment of truth and reality. Because projections are just that. They're a projection of an energy, a feeling, and a fear. And therefore it stimulates woe and concern. If you pulled back inside to a moment of awareness or need, you would find that you are very clear about what is needed and what to do about it. But if you feel you cannot do something about it, or you come up against other stronger energy, then you may project fear because of the effort that it takes to do it, or to just feel that you may not be heard no matter what. So there's a lot of angst in people about how do I support myself, how do I ask for what I need. And in that way, it's very important to recognize that you will have something happening inside of you that talks about unmet need, and then you will still come forward as best you can from knowing how to speak up, how to support yourself. But fears, they take many shapes and forms. It's important that we don't assume, because assumptions aren't very helpful in life, and they are full of projection, but they're also full of, to put it bluntly, kind of a lazy process.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's also that when people will then justify their intuition, which we teach people to really listen to, but they'll blend that assumption and that projection and those fears into, it's my intuition speaking.
Or it's just my feeling.
Or it's just my feeling. And so if you ever are engaging with someone in that dynamic and you're hearing that it's just, or it feels like it's being justified, then there's a pretty strong indication that this is actually happening from their head rather than actually from a feeling and from a heart space, because the heart space doesn't really need to justify itself. It just knows, and this is what we're all learning to do, is how to actually really trust and feel safe and good in the feelings that are speaking to us from this rather intelligent part of us.
Absolutely. And there is really a very different feeling when we project fearfully or anxiously, if we're nervous or worried. If we're making an assumption, there's a very different feeling. And it's often not informed from the moment, it's informed from the past. It's informed from past experiences or past conclusions. And so we make an assumption on what we've known, which may not be accurate for the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a different feeling in that head-based energy than there is in the part of us when we listen to ourselves, to our heart, that knowingness will feel right even if you're nervous about it. There's going to be a layer here where you trust, you relax, you know, and then the answers or the awareness comes forward.
Now, don't get us wrong here. This is a vulnerable path. It's asking you to trust what are often quite tender and tentative feelings. And so when you're speaking up from this place, even in a relationship, it can often feel very vulnerable, and which has its knock-on effect, of course, because if one person's speaking from that vulnerability and it comes across as tentative, then if the other partner's in a more head-based space, they can see that as a reason to be more firmly reassuring and try and fix the problem and override things, which can then end up leaving the person who's more sensitive to what needs to happen energetically to feel like, well, probably best I just go quiet again. And so there's a really big dance that's taking place within people, within relationships, and also across global consciousness, of actually really learning to feel what feels right. And the heart really wants us to understand this force of love. And love is very inclusive, and it wants us to sort of be open to understanding the wholeness of things, not just the specific, where the mind will pull us into the specific and the targeted. It gets very angsted about needs not getting met, where the heart tends to have an anchored energy that trusts a bit more, that knows that there is reason and room to be patient here.
And it doesn't mean that you cannot have the feelings. It's just important to understand that if things repeat, or it feels like there's energy and effort needed to make change or to speak up for yourself, then you will find that it's not a comfortable thing. So it's important to recognize that at this time of change in consciousness and awareness, everything you're hearing about in terms of the awakening, there is a new language growing, which is really talking about the heart. It's really speaking about feelings, and it's important that our mind does become really comfortable with what we feel without reacting to it, without feeling afraid.
So this is really the balance we're talking about. It's a balance which initially will ask you to tip into the feeling and heart energy. It'll ask you to tip into the sensitive, so that you can really get a stronger handle on actually this energy that is guiding your life. And it will threaten the ego, and it will threaten the mind, because as we've discussed before, the mind loves feeling like it's in charge. It loves laying out that list before your day's begun. It loves telling you everything that needs to fit in and be in order for you to feel any semblance of satisfaction or a glimpse of happiness, all of which are kind of lies, because it's going to do the same thing to you again tomorrow. But when you learn to access this balance point, then the mind becomes a really valuable tool that you can then use for the things you are creating, doing, and even engaging with in your life, with other people, communication, however it may be.
Well, the mind is an important bridge to understanding our expression, as you're saying, our creativity. It's an important bridge to the world and our comprehension of how we navigate the world itself and each other. So this is a practice, and it's important to understand that you may practice it every day, and gradually your experience, your trust in yourself grows. So don't feel concerned if suddenly you're finding there's a knee-jerk reaction or a strong feeling, and it's part of the healing process to repeat it. You're just not going to repeat it from the same place, and it won't feel exactly the same. So it is a practice in your communication.
Perhaps one of the spiritual myths, relating to one of the talks we gave, but perhaps one of the spiritual myths that need to be dispelled is that in some ways in doing this you achieve some state of kind of Zen-like spiritual perfection. That's not the case at all. This is where we are constantly being invited to kind of make a quicker and quicker choice to return to this balance point when we notice life situations, things, relationships have thrown us out again.
I think that the Zen process, or the state of complete change, happens only if you're less living a normal life and more living the spiritual life and more connected to the divine place all of the time.
Which must be an incredible challenge for you at times.
Who, me?
Yes, you. Because I see the world you live in with all your beloved guides and friends and teachers, and then what the world asks of you. And it must sometimes feel like you are a gymnast who's been asked to do rather extended splits.
Let's just say I understand hermitage.
The desire to retreat inward.
Yes. The desire to go live somewhere quiet where no one is making noise or, yeah.
Over these many years that we've been together, I've learned to see the days when I just need to let Yasmin be in her space, because she's keeping grand company. And also when we do live that more deeply spiritual life, we don't, or I suppose that you can speak for yourself with this, but I noticed that those more external needs of doing and rushing become so much less of an incentive. You feel less engaged in it.
Absolutely. Well, it's not about the physical sensations as much, I guess, in the doing. But walking the dogs along the foreshore and smelling the early morning air and the vegetation.
Certainly is.
That's nature's incense, and it's rather delightful. So I think it's just different senses become more predominant.
And so what you'll find when you really choose and work more and more towards this balance, a lot more of the sort of high adrenal activities of life become less attractive. Because you don't need bigger and bigger experiences to gain a sense of yourself. You start experiencing them in the subtle.
So it's important to be aware of what stimulates your mind, what keeps your mind busy, what gives you the endless lists. And if you sit back, you'll realise that a lot of things repeat every day. Your life repeats every day. A lot of those things in your life repeat every day. And that's okay. It's not about achieving a goal. It's not about getting there, because there'll always be something. So when you take that moment to pause and feel your heart take a breath, you'll enjoy the moment, you'll be more present, and projections will be less of an experience. Now, that doesn't mean you cannot anticipate pleasure, that you cannot look forward to good things. It's simply that you will look forward to it from where you are, and you won't go there mentally before you are.
Oh wow, that was good. That was really good. And on that note, I think we should leave it there. So again, we hope that these videos, these talks speak to you, and may they keep you close to your heart and close to your feelings.
Lovely to talk to you again today.
Till next time.
Bye now.